1930s in the United States. The main concern was the Great Depression and the hard times for Americans all over the country. Charles Towser, A.J. Shelley, and John Williams were young boys whose families were trying to make it through that period. And like most Americans, they were farmers and struggled to be self-sufficient. John Williams grew up in Oregon on a homestead.
I think one of the things that helped me as a child, I lived during the Depression, and my father didn't lose his job, but he gave up his job and moved out in the hills of Coos County, and he improved up on 160 acres of prime timber, and but to do that, you had to make certain improvements and live there for 3 years, and we did that. After that period of time, then, after he had improved up on it and therefore owned the land, we moved back to the city, and I played ball, got a athletic scholarship to Willamette University, and was attending the university when the war broke out.
On September 1st, 1939, the world woke to a new reality. The German army, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, invaded Poland.
Allein liegt die Zukunft des deutschen
The
Volkes.
U.S. was committed to neutrality until the morning of December 7th, 1941, when a surprise counterattack on Pearl Harbor occurred. This assault was led by Chichuchi Nagumo and Izuroku Yamamoto of the Japanese Army. It was an attempt to stop the ships from going to Japan and buying time for the Japanese to become a stronger naval country. America would no longer remain neutral, and young men were called to war. Charles Towser recalls.
Well, I joined when I was in high school, but they wouldn't take me because my parents wouldn't sign up for me until I graduated from high school. So when I graduated from high school, I was on my way to boot camp in San Diego that next week.
John tells what his title in the war was.
Probably the first thing, because I was with the first. I have to get this all together here, but it's the 28th Marines, and it's the first battalion and C Company.
On February 19th, 1945, a small island a few hundred miles off the coast of Japan, named Iwo Jima, was raided. Barely out of their teens, Shelley, Williams, and Towser were called into battle. They were optimistic about what might happen to the U.S. Marines at that time needed to cut off the island, so kamikazes couldn't make it all the way to the United States. Without Iwo Jima, the kamikazes would run out of fuel before they could get to the U.S. Charles tells the strategic importance of Iwo Jima.
In those days, it was the Army Air Corps. Before we took Iwo, they had to land in the ocean and probably drown or whatever. And when we took it, they could land on Iwo then, and that saved a lot of lives right there.
The conditions of the island were abnormal, especially for Marines who have only grown up in a protected, safe environment. John Williams says one step in the beach and the sand would be up to your knees. Shelley tells of his description.
On Iwo Jima, there was very little vegetation. Most of rock and sand and volcanic ash.
Iwo Jima would be the turning point of the war. This battle would cause the Japanese to go into a defensive mode, because their airfields would be shut down by U.S. invaders and bombing raids. At the same time, 1,000 bombing raids on Japanese strongpoints were happening. These attacks caused the Japanese to become very disorganized and less likely to attack. These raids also gave the Americans an advantage, with taking over more of the surrounding islands, which held many Japanese communication hubs, as well as other airfields. The Battle of Iwo Jima would last for 37 days. The C Company were the first to land on the beach at 0900. They had to fight for every square meter of the land. Although the island was only 8 square miles, documents show that only 50 meters per day were taken. U.S. troops started opposite the side of the volcano, Mount Suribachi. To get to the volcano was necessary to win. Then, on the 5th day of battle, the men reached the volcano, and John Bradley, Ira Hayes, Frank Sousley, Michael Strank, Harloon Block, and Rene Gagnon raised the American flag, symbolizing victory for the United States. That's not how it played out, though. There would still be 32 more days left of the fight for Iwo Jima. 2/3 of the U.S. soldiers died in combat. Of the survivors, only 12 men are alive today.
Well, it was like a most unusual experience. Never experienced anything like that before in my life. Because you know, war is hell, regardless where it is.
John tells what those 37 days were like for him.
Oh boy. The members, I was a machine gun section leader, and the members of that section that got killed immediately or even wounded was quite a shock, and that stays in your mind because those are the fellows that you've been with, and now, boom, they're gone. Even though you knew that could happen, that stayed in your mind, and it's still in my mind. Seeing some of them just killed right alongside of you. Well, one particular incident stands out so vividly in my mind. We were advancing probably about the 5th or 6th day on the island. We were advanced across the open area, and there were a bunch of Japanese that were behind us on our flank, and so I decided to have my machine gun open fire, and a fellow by the name of Shields, who was a gunner, couldn't fire. He says, I'm not sure they're Japanese. I can't fire, so I said, okay, Elmer, step back where I was, and one of them killed the fellow that I replaced, or that moved from the place I was, that couldn't shoot the machine gun. That stays in your mind because just for his inability to say, yes, I'm going to fire, is what caused me to replace him, and so he got killed instead of me.
When the Marines thought that they had cleared the small island, the real feeling of victory happened. The first B-29 was landed and repaired on the island. American soldiers knew that there would be no more chance that a kamikaze would come and sink an American destroyer. The Marines still had lost many men. A.J. tells how he felt after the war.
And we went to the cemetery where all the crosses were, down in the sand. And the most horrible thing to me about Iwo Jima was, I remember seeing men with their arms and legs and their heads cut off, and eventually they came by and picked them up and took them to this cemetery. And I sat down in the sand and cried. The worst thing about that to me was having to leave that cemetery with the best men that went to Iwo Jima. We had to leave them.
To help the people of our time understand the legacy, John Williams states why his company should be remembered.
Well, of course, just as a part of the whole, not to take anything away from any of the other companies, but the C Company, not only because of the loss of men, but the C Company went completely through on to the last day of the Iwo Jima battle.
The majority of the nation sees that picture of 6 brave soldiers raising the flag into a mountain, and they think of the island Iwo Jima. But the real legacy is the men who fought there and died for our country. That is the real reason why Iwo Jima is special and remains an important part of our history in one of the most influential battles of World War II.